Seconds. All right. Josh Coburn, welcome to the There Is No Try podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here, man.
It's my absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it. It's an honor for me to always kind of be present for these kinds of conversations. I'm excited. Thank you.
This is going to be a lot of fun. So for those of you who don't know Joshua Coburn, so best known for probably your book, right? Shit That Needs to Be Said.
Yeah. Shit That Needs Said So You Can Kick All the Ass is kind of my latest release. Other than that, a lot of people know me from like now TikTok, which is crazy, Instagram, and speaking. I do a lot of motivational speaking and speaking in schools and corporations. So, yeah.
I love that. So, and I actually want to geek out with you a little bit about the motivational speaking and doing conversations with corporations and what have you, because I've ended up doing some of that completely by accident, not on purpose. And it's actually been really rewarding and a lot of fun. I've really deeply enjoyed it and connected with some great people. So I'd love to get into that. So, okay. I also think of you as what I would call the modern day Renaissance man, right? So
I'll take it.
Right. So let's see, what's a Renaissance man? So back in the day, a Renaissance man was a guy who could write poetry and calligraphy and also fence and kick somebody's ass, right? And it was like, he knew the manners of which fork to use at a fancy dinner, but at the same time, he also knew how to rein a horse or shoe a horse, right? It was sort of, it was that ability to have a depth of knowledge in a lot of different things. It really makes one a complete person. Well, we obviously don't need blacksmiths quite the way that we used to. So those things have changed a little bit, but you've got a varied interests.
Right.
You love to dabble in a lot of things and be knowledgeable in a lot of things. So I think of you sort of personifying sort of that modern day Renaissance man.
Man, I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah. Honestly, for me, it's about connecting to people. This life is just about connection, really growing with people and learning. And the more that I know, the more people that I can talk to and gain knowledge from. So if I have a little piece of a lot of things, not that I'm good at any of them or know a lot about any of them, then I can kind of nitpick and start to get into people. And that's such a huge benefit in life and business. So that's, I suppose, a good description, though I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that about myself necessarily.
Especially when you're wearing that shirt. By the way, text me where you got that shirt. That shirt is ridiculous. I want it. That is amazing. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
For those who are listening, it says, there it is, stay humble or be humbled. Absolutely love that. And interestingly enough, I've spoken to a variety of people on this show, from authors, entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, NFL stars, I mean, you name it, rappers, etc. And people think that those folks who have reached that level of success are going to be sort of brash and arrogant and what have you. Don't get me wrong. There are those people that are out there. However, the vast majority of them that I have spoken to have been very nice, humble people.
Absolutely. I will fully agree with that. Any of my kind of childhood idols, and weirdly, I've had the chance to meet them all. They were all very humble, kind, and were willing to share all their knowledge. And it was just a matter of asking. It was wonderful. Mm-hmm. Like, people are so afraid of that. And it's like, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there are people who kind of meet their heroes and are a little bit crushed, but I haven't really had that experience, thankfully.
So Josh, let's get a little bit into your story. Where are you from? Tell me where you were raised, some parent situation. Let's get started into who you are.
Absolutely. So born and raised in central Iowa, a small town called Brooklyn. And when I say Brooklyn, people are always like, oh, New York, awesome, that fits you. And I'm like, no, it's a small farm community of like 1,500 people. My older brother and sister were kind of all-American kids. But we did grow up in a kind of emotionally and physically abusive home, alcoholic home. Mm. And of course, I didn't really fit, because I was more interested in National Geographic and traveling and tattoos and art than I was in agriculture and bush light. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the epitome of where I grew up.
Yeah.
Not taking anything away from that, but it just didn't fit me.
Yeah.
And that really showed, because as I kind of went through school and stuff, I felt very awkward, very out of place. And, I got a bit of crap for that from time to time, but it wasn't until I started getting heavily tattooed and really visually becoming physically different. That things kind of took a turn. And, that's my choice, of course, but there's a big difference from central Iowa in the 90s and LA in the 90s,
Yes, very.
So that's where I was at. And I was definitely the weird kind of Coburn kid. And I'm sure that put pressure on my dad and my family too. But, a lot of, I grew up with a lot of beatings, a lot of issues with personal value and self-worth, because I just believed what people would tell me.
Sure.
And it was a struggle. And it was, honestly, it was September 5th, 2001 when I kind of bottomed out. And it was after I got out of high school. I thought, because people from where I'm from, they do what dad did. They kind of get a job. They put up that fence out front, get the dog, get the wife, get the family, the whole thing. And that's great. Again, for those that fits. And I thought that was right for me. So, I got a job in a factory and thought that was the path. And I hated my life. Yeah. And I was miserable and just started to hit bottom. And it was really because nobody ever really told me that I could do the things I wanted to do. There's just no support. People from here don't do those kinds of things.
Yes. Yeah. That's for other people. That's for those people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your upbringing is strikingly similar to mine. Grew up in a small rural town, alcoholic mother, no way out, mostly lumber mill, paper mill was kind of what you did, or truck driver, right? So very rural, very blue collar, same kind of thing, well-worn path, which is, knock a girl up right outside of high school, set stakes, bush light, bonfires. That's your thing. And one thing that you said about being sort of the weird kid before you changed visually.
Yeah.
For people like us, that is one of the most lonely experiences of your entire life. And what's super foreign about it is it's where you're from. And I'm using air quotes here. It's where you're from and you feel like a complete stranger, almost like you're in a foreign land. And as a matter of fact, I will tell you, I have felt more comfortable in foreign countries than in the small town in which I grew up. I'm now 41 years old and I still say that. I feel so uncomfortable there because it's just this isn't what I'm into. I was into everything but lumber mills and drinking Bud Light and,
right.
It just wasn't my thing.
Absolutely the same. And, it's funny because you always hear about you can feel lonely in a crowd of many. Yep. And gosh, that was my whole life, like until I was in my, early to mid 20s. And I can't say I feel a ton different in a lot of other situations. But I understand that if I don't belong, then there's other people around me who maybe feel like they don't belong. Yeah. So I need to grab those people. We'll be our own band of misfits and we're going to kick ass together. Yeah. My closest friends, you would see me standing with them and you would never believe that we would ever be friends. And they're family, they're my brothers. And that simply comes from the fact that they're good people that know where they're going. They got a goal mindset and we're all headed in the same direction. It's crazy.
I love that. So you just touched upon it. You got out of high school, you got the factory job.
Yeah.
You are miserable.
Right on.
Tell me about that piece. What did that feel like? What was your day like?
I worked nights at the time, and I remember, I'll do a short piece of detail here. I remember pouring a bowl of Fruity Pebbles cereal, right? And I work nights, so this is like, 2 in the afternoon. I pour up this bowl of cereal, and I throw the spoon in there, and I go to the refrigerator and go to grab the milk, of course, right? And I opened it up, and I was out of milk. Now, this isn't a big deal, but I remember standing there and just crying my eyes out because my confidence was so low, and I had beaten myself up and let others beat myself up so much that the thought of going across the street to the grocery store to get milk was too much, because I couldn't hear somebody tell me that, oh, looking like that, you'll never have a career. You'll never have a good job. You know, why would you do this to yourself? I couldn't handle that anymore. And it was then that I was like, what am I doing here? You know? So really that question was in my mind, and it was, you know, my only answer in that specific moment was obviously failing, nothing.
Right.
But what's interesting is roughly 24 hours later, because I did go into the factory that night, did my work, but I decided there that I was done. When I got home, instead of kind of doing my normal routine, that I was going to write a note and I was going to end this. So I went home and I wrote a note, and I remember finishing up, and I haven't talked about it much yet, but I was obviously severely depressed, had a lot of anxiety, and everybody deals with anxiety, contrary to popular belief. It's just the level of which we have it and how we choose to deal with it. Mm-hmm. At that point, it was immense. And when I hit that kind of 90-minute mark from when I got home, that was when I normally went to bed, because that was my process. And that kept me safe. That kept my armor up so no one could bother me in this, you know, kind of makeshift castle of my small apartment. Anyway, at that point, my anxiety hit me so bad that I started sweating, and I started to think, like, I can't end my life right now. I have to go to bed. This is what you do. Right. And yeah, and it's like such a weird thing that, like,
so crazy.
That's what curbed me in that moment. Like, the thing that I hated and struggled with is really what changed me. And I went to sleep, and I woke up a few hours later, and I just felt different. And it was because all that shit that I'd stuffed down, I finally wrote down in a note and let it out. Yep. And it wasn't as heavy anymore. I could have talked to somebody, I could have done anything, but that's how I did it. And I thought, well, if I can take responsibility for my death, why in the hell can I not take responsibility for my life? Sure. And that's when it all changed. It was right then.
That's absolutely amazing. What a beautiful story. And thank you for being so candid with us.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of people that are struggling in this exact moment with those feelings. You know, specifically, this is my bias coming through. So I raise my hand. This is my bias coming through. Mark my words. I think life is harder growing up poor and rural than poor and in the city. Because when you are poor and rural, everyone is poor. There is no way out. Everywhere you look, everybody's in a bad situation, right? It's just sort of levels of shitty. There's very little outside of that. At least when you're in a city. If you're sitting on a particular street corner in, let's say, Los Angeles, you can look up and go, well, there's big buildings over there, and there's a guy driving a nice car, and that girl has a nice thing. Okay, so there is a way out. There's some way I can get out of here. But when you're rural and you have no money, you're a prisoner in that place. Yep. You're wildly disconnected, and it doesn't seem to be that there's any avenue out. And you just sit there with this sort of marinating in this life is so freaking hard. Is this all there is? Is this it? Is this what we're here for? It is brutal. So I know people get a little touchy when I kind of say that, but as a person who has been poor in both the city and rural, I will tell you the rural part is really tough. So switching back to that moment, did your parents know what you were going through? Did your friends know? Did your loved ones, your girlfriend, whoever was in your life?
Nope. No one knew. I bottled it up because that's what men do, right?
Yes. My dad, especially men from the Midwest.
Right. Yeah. My dad was a hard ass. His dad was a hard ass.
Yeah.
You know, I was responsible. I've been working my ass off since I was 8 years old. I mean, I had responsibility early. We didn't have much. So, if wood need cut for the wood burner in the basement, guess who did it? I was on the list, 6 a.m. Saturday morning, I'm chopping. And, you just did the work. You didn't complain. You got up. It didn't matter if it was 90 degrees or negative 9 degrees, you're doing the work. Yeah. And that's how I approached everything emotionally as well. Mm-hmm. So nobody really knew. And it wasn't until I started publicly talking about it that my family and friends would be like, I had no idea. And I'm like, well, you remember that, those number of months where you just never saw me? That was bottom. And they're like, oh, you know what? That makes sense. So that's how they kind of could reconcile those moments for them from the outside looking in. Because I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to be judged or perceived as weak. Now I realize that it takes true strength to talk about your weakness and your vulnerability.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
real strength.
So, shoe on the other foot for a second, for the listeners that are out there that want to be or have concern for their friends and family. Josh and myself are very similar in that we just kind of zip it and we kind of bear down. And that's very typical of men, right? Women tend to be much better communicators around these things. Mm-hmm. And men are sort of taught, men don't cry, men don't talk about these things. You just kind of zip it. And that's so bad for you. It is freaking sort of emotional cancer, as you experienced, because you got pretty close to the edge there. So for those of you who want to take care of your friends and your family and your loved ones, notice what Joshua said. He said there was a change in his routine, something that was out of the ordinary, something that started to disappear. And so if you're worried about those that are around you, this is one of those things, like pay attention to what people's norm is, right? So that, everyone has a routine in their life. Everybody sort of does whatever that is for them, their gym, the coffee shop, whatever it might be. When you have a friend or a loved one that just suddenly isn't present, they just sort of stop doing their routine, that is a huge red flag for you to, hey, are you okay? Are you doing all right? Check in.
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So tell me, what decision did you make? And it could be a small one, but what decision did you make at the bottom when things are just as miserable as possible that you said, okay, I've had enough. I've took control of my life. I sort of emotionally vomited on this piece of paper. What'd you do next?
My first thought was that if this is what bottom looks like, I got nothing to lose. All that shit that people said I could never do, that's what I was going to go for. And in my head, I remember because I climb mountains, I've been hiking. I was like, I'm going to put them on these kind of imaginary mountains in my mind, right? And I'm just going to go. And I didn't know how I was going to get there. And that's a big misconception, right? As a goal setter, you don't have to know shit about how to get to the top of the mountain. You just got to have the drive to get there. 100%. And, tenacity over smarts all day.
All day long.
And it was then. It was like, if I don't reach these lofty ass goals, I'm at least going to be ahead of where I am today. And that was it. That was where my confidence started to come from, because I knew that just taking a small step forward was better than doing nothing. So because I didn't have confidence, and just being like, I'm taking responsibility for my life, that doesn't change your confidence. Yes. But setting the goals and doing something every day and looking back at your trail behind you, that's building confidence. And that's just how it happened. And I had to be disciplined. So I knew that if I was going to do this, I had to do one small thing every day. It could have been a phone call. It could have been writing something down, or it could have been something huge, but it didn't matter as long as progress was there. So I guess to shorten that up, it was about deciding that I was going to go big or go home, period.
So something you just said about setting goals and not knowing how to get there and having no expertise in that, this is something I talk about a lot, because there's a myth out there that is, you got to have experience in something before you can go do that thing.
Right.
And the industry, and what I mean by the industry is, you want your dream job. Okay. You go onto LinkedIn or Indeed or one of these job sites. And what do they all ask for? How much experience do you have? You got to have 5 years of this and 10 years of that. Here's the funny thing. If you somehow got pushed that stupid HR person out of the way, I hate HR people. And you went right to the top and you asked the founder of the company, hey, when you started the company, how much experience did you have? He or she would look at you and go, what are you talking about? Right. That's the irony of all of this is Bill Gates had no experience. Buffett had no experience. Bezos has no experience. Musk has no experience. Right. Zuckerberg has no, I can keep going all day, right? Like 100% of them have no experience in the thing that they built, right? So we empirically have data that you don't need to know how to do it. You need to do it. That's the key difference. Go execute. And you're going to make mistakes. That's good. Those are valuable. The point is that you keep going through the mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. And find out what you're shitty at. Whatever you're the worst at is the job you hire somebody for.
Yes.
It's very simple. But yeah, the chicken or the egg in business drives me crazy. You know, I mean, nearly every single goal that I've ever had in business came from somebody to say, you can't do that. Because like, I'm a punk rock kid at heart. So, you know, middle fingers up. If you tell me no, I'm going to do it.
I'm double down, right?
Yeah. So,
right.
you know, that's just how it is. And it's like, you can't look like that and work in corporate America. Watch me. I will do it 1,000 times over.
Well, the funny thing is, you know, the guys that look like you, there is a binary outcome. You don't find a lot of guys that look like you that are middle management at the accounting firm, right? It's either the guy who owns the shop or the guy who's brand new, that's like the delivery driver or whatever, right? Like, It's a funny thing how that works. Like, you're either calling the shots, which is why you get to dress however the hell you want, because it's your business, right? Like, you earned your way to the top. So I absolutely love that. I mean, that's how we should all look at everything. And I always push back and go, do you think the founders of Airbnb or Uber had a long, illustrious career in the hospitality or taxi industry?
Right.
Give me a break, man.
That's why they're killing it.
That's why they're killing, because they were naive enough to ask really basic, dumb questions and challenge the rules on why do we have to have a medallion? Who says we have to have a medallion on our cab? Why do I got to pay New York City $250,000? That's stupid. I don't have to pay my buddy who gives me a ride to the airport. Poof. That's it. That's frankly a very dumb, naive question. And they built a multi-billion-dollar business based on that silly question, right? So don't listen to conventional wisdom. Listen to Joshua. Challenge, push, drive into the unknown. It is the most valuable thing. Okay, so my next question is, you have this I'll call it sort of an epiphany, but it really, I think of it a little bit differently, which is I think of it almost like fear setting, right? We talk a lot about goal setting,
right?
But you really are talking about fear setting, which is, well, what's my greatest fear? Death is a pretty big fear,
right?
It's typically number one, right? Okay, well, I kind of sort of like psychologically check that off the list. Okay,
right.
Now that I'm worried about that a whole lot less, now what, right? So instead of just focusing on the goal, you actually can focus on the fear. Like, is this the only thing I was afraid of? Is this the worst that this could be? This ain't that bad.
Exactly. And that's
you're free to get after it.
Yeah, exactly. Free. You're free. You don't have to worry about how much time I have. You can worry about filling the time you do have. And for me, like, you know, I had some friends die in car accidents and stuff, so that was never lost on me. And to the point you made earlier about kind of looking like you choose to look, I tattooed my face very early on because I was like, I don't want to be stuck at some retail store. And, I'm barely going to get hired at a goddamn McDonald's. But if I don't want that, I want this. And this allows me one option. And that's what I went for. And chasing that down didn't take too long. And it was really, like you said, it was about understanding if this is bottom, if this is where I don't have to think about anymore and I can focus here, all the white noise kind of went away. And it was like, it wasn't a matter of like, do I ask dad? Well, dad didn't know. Do I ask mom? Mom doesn't know. And that's what we're taught, go to the people, go to your parents. And then I had some gentleman tell me, well, you don't ask for financial advice from a homeless man. You find a financial advisor. And I was just like, that changed my whole life. So now, because I didn't have answers for the things I wanted to do, for speaking in schools, for writing books, I just started writing. And I found somebody who was a speaker. I'm like, how'd you do it? And they're like, I put on a button-up shirt and I wore khakis and I started talking professional. I was like, I'm never doing that. So that tells me that I need to do whatever's opposite and go. And that's exactly what happened, because what did I have to lose? And I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah. So how long after you have this moment do you move?
Immediately. I actually wrote on the back of my suicide note the beginnings of my first book. Immediately. I love it. And the funny thing is, like, perspective does a lot of things to you. And while I might have started then, people are like, oh man, then you've been successful forever. No, it took me 18 years to reach this specific goal that I had. And to me, that was the apex. And that was walking into the doors of the high school that I graduated from and kind of owning it, because I spoke to that whole school and everything. And, you know, I've spoken to thousands of people, but those 300 mattered way more, you know? It's so crazy how those things work.
No, hold on. I'm laughing because I have the same goal and I haven't gotten there yet. I
Really?
legitimately have the same exact goal. I've spoken all through the United States, and my like sort of my, I don't know, maybe this is my ego, maybe this is the chip on my shoulder, whatever you want to call it. I'll say yes to both of those things. I can't wait. I will keep working until my high school calls and says, hey, kid who we didn't even think was going to graduate, and guidance counselor literally told me to set more realistic expectations. Wow, you skipped most of your senior year and somehow you graduate. Look at this. Yeah, we'd like to have you come in and talk to the students. That I keep working for that phone call. So I'm cracking up because I'm like, oh my God, that's my goal.
Dude, I get it. Because like, honestly, I remember the principal at the time, like, so what's your plans? You know, what do you want to do? I was like, I just want to get paid to be me. You know what? I get paid to be me. That's what I do. And he's like, well, that's, you know, that's not a job. You have to figure out what that means. I'm like, well, then I couldn't say, I will define what that means, because I didn't know that I could. But that's what I did ultimately. You know, a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of businesses running all at once. And here we are, you know, I get paid to engage with human beings on a lot of different channels and make lives better. Holy shit. How can you ask for a better life? You can't.
No, that's as good as it gets. So, okay. So where did you move to?
In terms of like physically, out of,
right.
Well, funny thing, when I hit bottom, I moved about 20 minutes away to another small town, which ultimately led to my first kind of entrepreneurial venture. I hit bottom there, got out of the business I was in and got into the tattoo and body modification business. So that's where I kind of took my lumps and where I started to learn about being an entrepreneur from a guy who I wouldn't say was a great entrepreneur, but he showed me that anything was possible. And that really allowed me to take the gloves off and go into the fight with knuckles bare, you know, and it was, that was really where it started. So that was my first kind of venture. And that's how, you know, the book publishing started. That's how record label started. That's how clothing line started. It was all funded through the tattoo studio back in the day.
That's amazing. So you didn't have a background in tattoos. You didn't have a background in the music industry or the apparel industry. But you took a passion, something that you were, I'd say even more than a passion, because I actually kind of hate the word passion. It's so overused. It's become like a trope at this point. But you've taken sort of this theme of this thing that you're really into that you would do if you didn't get paid. That's a critical one. And just push that extension, right? So my point in saying that is, for people listening, it's not like Joshua was like, hey, I'm super into tattoos and J. Crew. Like that's not how that works, right? Like, it's not like you're like, I love khakis and button downs and I love body modification, right? Like you took a singular theme and extended it across multiple verticals.
Yeah, absolutely. And even today, it's still that way. Like several years ago, you know, I really started pushing the fitness angle. Didn't take long, ended up with a fitness sponsorship. Started dealing in supplements as well as cigars. I'm such a cigar guy, and it didn't take long. Right on. and we started kind of getting into that world a little bit. And, you know, now my wife and I actually handle a lot of different cigar social media pages, a lot of different brands outside of that world as well. So, I mean, that's just another avenue, but it all comes down to, like you said, different pieces of things I love seem to turn a profit for me. And again, why would you have it any other way? If I decide that, you know, I'm passionate about boat repair, you can bet your ass I'm going to be in Costa Rica repairing boats on the beach, making business, you know, that's just how it's going to be.
Yep. So, I mean, there is really the crux of this whole conversation. What the whole podcast is called There Is No Try.
Mhm.
I mean, you're personifying exactly that. And I would argue that now has never been a better time to go and define what your success is, but be able to go and do that thing, right? I mean, some of the wealthiest celebrities that we have in the United States don't have a single discernible talent. They're not on TV. They don't dance. They don't sing. They don't entertain. And yet the Kardashians seem to turn a tidy profit every year, right? So you can literally make a job out of zero. I would argue that's what the Kardashians have done, generally speaking, then turn that fame into business. Or you can do what a regular person like you or I do, which is you turn a business from a passion, and that's how you grow your confidence, your wealth, your stability, whatever the goal is for you, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's incredible. As you know, I'm a huge cigar guy. That's kind of my thing. So let's a quick cigar question, because I got to geek out about cigars for like 2 seconds. Go-to cigar. Give me 2 or 3 that kind of are in the high rotation.
Man, you know what? In the last 6 months, I really got into Black Label trading. I don't know if you're familiar with them. If you look at their artwork, you'll be like, I get why Josh enjoys them. From a marketing standpoint, it's like looking at me and be like, you listen to Slayer? Well, hell yes, I do. It's the same thing. You smoke Black Label? Yeah, I do. So they're absolutely at the top of my list. I just had for the first time a Crux yesterday that was stellar. But when I started out, and an old favorite is the Perdomo 20th anniversary. It's a nice light cigar. It's my morning smoke. God damn, you can't beat that. What about you?
The construction of the Perdomos is fantastic, by the way. They're always on point. So shout out to Nick. Gosh, what is my go-to? I'm going to raise my hand and be like, my answers are total douchebag answers. Full stop. Like, I've been a collector for a number of years. I own a successful cigar business. So I'm very, very fortunate that what I get to smoke is not what most people would consider normal. I get that. That being said, there's a handful of things that I like, but I'm super specific. So let me give you an example. I like Fuente Opus X, like most people do. However, if they're not at least 3 to 5 years old, I'm not into them. They're bitter, they're accurate, they have burning issues. And I know why. I went to visit the factory, went through the whole process. Listen, they're an amazing, amazing cigar, but when they're young and they're fresh, there's so much oil in that tobacco to get it to be that super cayenne pepper that there's burn issues and draw issues. There is. And the Fuente family does a better job at that than anybody else. It's not a slight against them, but you put a few years of age on that cigar, oh man, right? I mean, just ridiculous. So that's one of my faves from out of the Dominican Republic for what I would call like regular production cigars that anybody listening to this could go get. I love Tatuaje.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically their 51st TAA edition, which is a limited edition for the TAA retailers, pardon me. Fantastic cigar, really affordable, like $13 a stick. Nat Sherman and Foundation are 2 other cigars that I really, really enjoy that I would call sort of affordable luxury cigars. Those are really, really great. Anything in a Lancero made by either one of those folks. I'm a huge Lancero guy. And then recently I cracked into some older stuff in my collection, some 10 and 15-year-old Davidoff. When they first started putting on the 702 wrapper, before they even called it the 702 wrapper, those things are just delicious. But I'm lucky, man. I get to smoke a lot of old stuff. So most of my new stuff is 2 to 5 years old. Right. That's my new stuff, right? For me. And a lot of the stuff that I smoke is significantly older than that. So
that's amazing. I'm a little jealous. I've only been into cigars for maybe 2 years, and I'm thankful I had some really good guides who kind of opened that door. And now, of course, I'm like, well, if I get, my wife buys me a 150 capacity humidor, and I'm like, oh man, that'll last forever. Filled the next week. Now I got a few more, and it's like, okay, I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
So I'll set some of those Crux back though. Now that I know, I'll set a few of those back and hold on to them for a couple years.
It's interesting, not to make this a whole big cigar conversation, but Nicaraguan tobacco. So if you like Nicaraguan stuff, like Padron is probably the most well-known. Tatuaje Foundation, right? Great cigar companies. Nicaraguan tobacco doesn't age very quickly. As a matter of fact, it barely ages at all. Conversely, Cuban products, I smoke a lot of Cuban cigars. If you don't age Cuban cigars, you're tasting green pneumonia, young, disgusting, just unsmokable. Right. So, they have to be aged. So if you're a person who smokes Cuban cigars, just put them in your humidor for just 6 months, just 6 months, and you'll notice a huge difference. Heaven forbid you put it down for a year or two. Dominican cigars aren't quite as needy, I'll say, for time, the way Cubans are, but boy, does it make a difference, right? So the aforementioned Fuentes, but really just about anything that comes out of there. So most of Davidoff comes out of the DR, if not almost all. All of that age just a little bit can be really, really meaningful. People are sort of surprised how much just letting it rest can actually change things.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I just haven't done that. Like I said, I haven't been in the world long enough. So my ignorance is high and my learning curve is long. So I do like Nicaraguan cigars most, which kind of makes sense based on what we're talking about too, because those don't age as much or maybe don't need that as much, where the others tend to. But that's not to say that those maybe in the long term aren't as good, or obviously in your case better, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. They all have their place. I love Nicaraguan cigars. I love Padron. I love Tatuaje. I love all these brands. They're fantastic. I smoke them on a regular basis. Big fans. Great. They're just different, right? And so I have a lot of fans and friends and cigar guys that will say, I only smoke Cuban stuff. They make the best cigars. If you believe that, okay, let's say that you believe that, then I assume you only drink French wines. Right. And you only drink whiskey from Kentucky. Is that what you do? Because they don't, right? They drink bourbon from here. They drink whiskey from Ireland. They drink this from Scotland. Okay. So you don't have that sort of singular flavor profile when it comes to whiskey or with wine. And you agree that other places other than France, the birthplace of wine and bourbon, right, Kentucky, you agree that other countries and other places can make great product within those flavor verticals. Okay, then why do you believe something as foolish as saying Cubans are quote unquote the best? That's the dumbest analog I've ever heard of. That being said. What you can say is that there's a flavor profile that you prefer. Right. And Cuban tobacco tastes a certain way. Dominican tobacco tastes a certain way. Honduran, Nicaragua, et cetera, et cetera. And so having a preference, that makes sense. But one being sort of better than the other, that's just ignorant thinking. Right? That's just not how it works.
See, and I'm the guy right now who tends to feel like the only bad cigar is the one I haven't smoked yet. So... that's where I'm at.
Well, you're new in your journey, and people ask me this all the time, like, "Oh, Pierre, like, what should I get? What should I get?" And I'm like, "Smoke everything."
Yep.
Oh, smoke everything. Yeah, because this is one of those things. Experience can only be your guide. I don't know what your tastes are, what your preferences are. Like, there's so many variables. Forget all that stuff. Try lots of different stuff. Right? Try different formats, different countries, different brands. There's so much out there, and unfortunately, Can I give you some pointers as to avoid that and this? Yes, but I don't actually think that does a ton of benefit for you, because you won't know why you avoided those things unless you try it and compare it against something else.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And that's kind of what I've learned. Thankfully, like I said, I've been surrounded with a good cigar family. So they've kind of given me just enough nudges, but let me trip and stumble just enough as well, So it's been good.
I love it. Okay, so let's sort of start bringing it home. You have started to build this incredible portfolio of businesses. And many of them, if not all of them, you didn't have a background in, but you were willing to ask the uncomfortable questions and to try. Mm-hmm. What one or two business verticals within sort of your brand? Because the way I view it, being from an outside perspective, is Joshua Coburn has a personal brand. He is him, right? He personifies this thing. And then in order to generate revenue to do that, there are certain things like the t-shirt, like the jewelry, like body modification, music, et cetera, that all fit within that brand image, that are also true to the brand, right? And now people who identify with your brand, they go, yeah, that's like me. I like that. That's a piece of me. Now they have a way of accessing that, whether it's through a t-shirt, music, whatever it might be.
Right.
Give the people just a quick story on one or two of the businesses that you have that really surprised you in terms of how it worked, or see where I'm going with that?
Yep, I follow completely. Well, I'll just stick with the kind of two that are kind of been my main focus the last several years, which is speaking and publishing and obviously writing and stuff. Because of course, the first thing you hear is nobody reads books anymore. And of course, I can attest that is complete bullshit and not true. And people don't read shitty books, and people don't read books that they don't apply to their life and don't provide value. They don't do that, but they do read things and they pay healthily for them. And what I didn't realize, though, initially going into this is that, success sometimes, especially with my first book, didn't mean 1,000 copies or 20,000 copies or 80,000 copies. Success meant slowly building and taking the return on your investment and reinvesting. It's not about book one or even book two. Honestly, I didn't turn a profit at all until book three. And when that happened, I started to see, okay, this investment, which at that point would have been 9 years of work before that happened. So, that kind of long tail look at things really is in at least publishing what it takes and the understanding that you have to provide value. And of course, all the while, I'm working on my personal brand and other bits and pieces. So at the end of the day, what was the surprise about book publishing especially is all the government regulations, all the numbers you have to have, all the technical BS, and of course the traditional, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have never got started, that we all say when we get into business, right?
100%.
Yeah. So, but what surprised me most was the writing of the books, the designing of the books, and the releasing of the books are the easy thing. You now have to live this for a year, 2 years, whatever it is. The book we're actually talking about today was released in 2018. Then we did a special edition last year, and we're coming down off that. So, I'm coming down off the high right now. And now it's a matter of, okay, I lived it for a few years. What's next? Because I already said the shit that needs said so you can kick ass. Yep. Now what the hell am I going to do?
Right.
And there's some things, of course, burning in that hopper. But the cool thing is, and the reason I brought up speaking as well and the journey associated with that is that goes hand in hand with different things. And to your point, speaking has probably come to you as an entrepreneur. People want to know, how the hell did you do this?
100%.
And yeah, and you're the expert, so you do it. It's weird how when you have zero credibility, you won't be hired. But when you still have zero credibility but experience, everybody's down to pay you money to stand there and say words, which is so funny when you break it down to that. And after I wrote my first book, I started speaking in colleges, I was like, number one, guys, I didn't go to college. So welcome to my first college class, And they're like, what? Like, how is this possible? And it's like, well, I wrote a book. It sold some copies. I now have credibility. By whom? I don't know, but someone's writing a check and I'm standing here.
Right. Yeah.
So
no, you're spot
that.
On. Yeah. So last thing is, around the speaking. So you wrote a book, and that definitely helps a lot with credibility and just kind of getting your name out there.
Right.
I've heard people are like, yeah, you got to hire an agent, but then I've also heard, well, no good agent would take you on unless you already had a bunch of experience and a bunch of speaking gigs, and we're kind of already going down that path. And for me, I really enjoy doing it. I would do it for free. I like getting paid for it, but I genuinely would do it for free. And I've told this story on the air a few times, but it really did mean a lot to me, which is And the conference I did just last year before the whole COVID craziness hit, I was in Vegas. It was this big conference for this sort of tech conference, and everybody in the room was either a CEO or CTO or a COO, right? So it's all C-suites. And I get up there and I am not a tech guy per se, but I'm an entrepreneur, and I kind of tell my life story that's mixed with my business and kind of wrap that all together and how I succeeded. Not to say how they're going to succeed, but how it was successful for me. And I got this tremendously positive feedback, like almost overwhelming. It kind of took me back. And one of the things I mentioned in the lecture was that I'm very dyslexic. I'm severely dyslexic. So I didn't know that until I was over 30 years old. I was always a terrible student. I thought it was because I was an idiot. I couldn't read very well. I can't do math very well. And it's because how my eye or my brain perceives those words. I perceive them like shapes, where a normal person sort of, sees the word in their mind. I perceive the shape of the word. So that's how I spell, which is super weird, right? And so I'm saying this, and I would just memorize all this stuff about where the menu was on the screen so that I could get through my day and constantly hiding from people so people wouldn't know how dumb I was. Well, I'm saying all this, and this guy in the front row is like about to cry. I mean, he's 15 feet from me. He's about in tears. He's just like choking it back because clearly I can just tell by his body language and the emotion on his face, he has the same exact affliction that I do.
Right.
So I get up to stage and I go to the back and I'm hanging out in the back and people are coming up and talking to me and chit-chatting. And he's there. He's waiting his turn to speak to me, but he wants to wait until everybody else has kind of had their thing and he can be last. And I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere until I talk to that guy. I got to talk to him.
Yeah.
He comes over to me, and he's, holding back tears. He shakes my hand, and he goes, "Thank you so much. I thought I was the only person." He goes, "I'm the CTO of a sort of small to mid-sized tech firm, and I can barely read the words on the screen. I just memorized the menu screens where everything's supposed to be." He goes, "I thought I was the only one who did that." And I go, "No, man, that's us. That's us." And he was just like overwhelmed with joy. And I went, "I'm getting paid for this? Like, really? You're going to pay me for this? This is amazing." Mm-hmm. So anyway.
That's awesome. Well done.
Thank you. I digress. So big props to you for building out your career in that way. It's so rewarding. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, man. Absolutely.
We are actually getting at the top of the hour. That was a very quick hour. So Thank you so much. Where can people go and follow you, go buy your book, go learn more about you? Quick plug here.
Everything's at joshuacoburn.com. That's the easy way. Google me. If you have all the socials, just search my name. You'll find me. I got a big beard and tattoos if you can't see me now. So I'm that Joshua Coburn, not any of the myriad of potential other Joshua Coburns.
Right, that's right. And we'll have a quick link to Joshua's website in the show notes, as well as socials. They'll all be in there. Real quick, The Shit That Needs to Be Said. Killer book. Go check it out, everybody. Mr. Coburn, thank you so much for being here, man. This has been a total pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And to all the listeners out there, thank you so much. Until next time, there is no try. Bye-bye.